Hey everybody, welcome back to Measure Twice, Cut Once. I'm Mike, and I'm learning so much I'm almost moderately dangerous.
And I'm Jennifer Lee, here to keep Mike from knocking out some walls to make space for his growing family, literally.
Wait, my family's growing? You want to tell me about this?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll tell you about Pam's got a secret for you. But anyways.
Oh, God. Here at Measure Twice, Cut Once, we're talking high-performance building, designer trends, breaking down housing regulations, discovering high-performance building solutions.
We're asking the questions about everything and anything to do with homes.
We want to help you build it right, design it right, and do it right the first time.
So let's get to it. Join us for Measure Twice.
Cut Once, because we all know twice is too much work. And we're especially excited today to welcome two old friends back into the studio. Of course, we're talking about Graeme. We're talking about Bryan. I don't think either of them need any introduction, but we probably should give them
give them a few words. Yeah.
All right. So let's start with Graeme. Graeme is local here, and any of you who've watched our episodes before are very familiar with his work. He is the founder and general manager of My House Design Build Team. He's received,
a few,
over 100 industry-related awards, including BC Georgie finalist, Custom Home Builder of the Year. That's no small feat. Best Customer Satisfaction, Renovator of the Year for how many years now? Like all of them? Pretty much.
Seven.
Kind of feels like it, right?
7 in a row.
He's just a big deal, Mike.
No, but
just
that's
a
the
big
best
deal.
part about going to the HAVAN Awards. It's like every third one is like, oh, there's Graeme again, which is great. We love to see you getting that recognition. So, and of course, Bryan needs very little introduction. He's very well known from his work on television. By TV, we mean HGTV and Stack TV.
I don't have any awards.
Well,
I doubt that's true. But
yeah, it's because your
one or
work
two.
speaks for itself. But here's the thing about him. Before he was on TV and before he was who you know him for now, he was a handyman and a business person first and foremost. And what he was able to do was translate that passion, that love for what he does into a series of shows about home renovations in Canada and the U.S., as well as a hotel renovation in the Bahamas. And I think the thing we love most about him is he tells it like it actually is. He's not leading us on to think we can finish my house in like a weekend for $10,000.
I do self-edit, however, yes.
So welcome both.
welcome.
Good to be here.
So we always start with this question with our returning guest. What's new? What's new and exciting? Graeme, you want to start?
Well, I think here in the greater Vancouver area in BC, we have lots of people doing a lot of renovations and home improvements as they're realizing perhaps they need to hang on to what they have. And a lot of people are making changes for their homes for family members, like the parents are having the kids return home, or the parents are moving in with the kids. Lots of multi-generational. People are looking for ways to add more space, have another suite, maybe a laneway, maybe turn their property into a fourplex or a sixplex. So there's lots of changes in the marketplace from a construction and a renovation perspective.
Awesome. So we're talking locally. Now we're talking a little bit further away for you. But
A little
what's
farther
really-
afield.
Absolutely. But you're doing all sorts of really cool stuff. What's new and exciting in your world?
Any more resorts coming your way?
Yeah, there may be. I mean, our construction development firm in Ontario is, continued to grow. We're doing some multifamily and multi-homes and rental and for sale. And as Graeme mentioned, we're seeing that trend back east as well. A lot of multi-generational housing now, or multifamily within the same structure, which I think speaks to this housing crisis and the increase in costs and the fact that now over 80% of our young Canadians under 40 have given up on home ownership, and these are some of the ways to combat that. We've down south, we've picked up another property hotel in Isla Mirada in the Florida Keys that is currently under renovation. And we're putting together a 600-acre development deal and a third hotel in the Bahamas as well. So there's a few things happening, and we're filming this under a new show called Bryan Baeumler, which is a little more, I think, a peek into the office and behind the curtain. It's more of the decision-making process on just doing or purchasing a property, how to finance it, how to plan it, how to actually, make it happen. And then ultimately how to operate it and expand the brand and go from there. So we're adding in a little more, while still edited, there are certain things that, that we don't put out there, but this is getting a little more into the weeds.
That's really cool. And I also heard too, you're also a pilot as well.
I am.
Which I find fascinating because sometimes I do the traffic from a helicopter. So I was like, anyone that flies, I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I got into that. I've been in aviation my entire life with family business back east. My dad had a aircraft sheet metal company that did repairs to private, military, and commercial airplanes. And I think he pushed me from a young age to get my license. But when you're a 16-year-old boy, you're chasing other dreams and things and what have you and busy. But, finally during COVID actually was the time when I realized, that the reliance we have on commercial travel between the island and Florida and Canada, and decided to settle in an airport community with the hangar attached to the home and got the license and started acquiring some aircraft and got more experience. I think I have 670 hours now and IFR and multi and a few different airplanes. So it's convenient, not only convenient, but it's actually a huge cost savings. We are a family of 6 and commercial to the island and back is about $6,000 return.
Wow.
So in the air, this is my justification to Sarah to continue to buy airplanes. I say we can get there and back with 6 of us for under $300. Forget about the capital cost or anything. We just, it's only, I'm talking fuel. But it's a significant savings and it's a freedom. And it to be honest, it's opened up our business opportunities because, yes, I can be there tomorrow morning, wherever you are. And it's been a lot. It's also a lot of fun.
Does your family like flying with you or are they nervous about it?
No, I think everybody enjoys it. A few of the kids are taking lessons here and there and they sleep in the back, so they seem pretty relaxed.
But from a family perspective, okay, I used to travel extensively. You spend so much time in airports waiting, and so you're saving a ton of time. What that really means for you is you're busy.
Yeah.
You're doing what you got to do. But
Exactly.
when you come home, you've got those 3 extra hours to spend with your family in the time that matters, as opposed to sitting in the airport waiting for other people to try to get on a standby.
Yeah, and you can bring things with, I can bring my hammer if I want and my screwdriver and I can bring things with me.
Can't do that through security.
Well, you can, but you're going to go to level 2 screening.
It's pretty interesting traveling through FBOs and some smaller airports. I mean, the security when you're operating the airplane is not an issue. It is funny when you go through some security airports and you're getting the pat down and you look at the guy and you're like, I have my hands on the controls of the airplane. It doesn't matter if I have a nail clippers in my bag. I'm actually keeping this thing in the air. So that's pretty interesting too. But yeah, it's a huge time saver.
So what I'm really taking from all of this is when you two gentlemen come back on for yet another appearance, and I hope you both will, we should really do it on site from
in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Mike and I need a vacation. We're good.
I don't know what our travel budget is, but we'll find it.
I'm wide open.
All right. Well, we're here to talk about the science and the innovation behind construction and demystifying it. And one of the areas we'd like to talk about is not just the finishes in the home, but what's behind the walls. And that specifically means the foundation, the roof of the home, which tends to be not one of the sexy areas that we end up talking about. But I think we can both agree, probably one of the most crucial areas.
And probably the most important reason that we currently have a housing crisis in Canada is that the value has never been placed on the footings and the roof and the foundation and the operation of the home. It's based on, that's pretty, let me buy it.
Pinterest or any of that stuff.
Yeah,
like
we
I want to
have-
keep up with the Joneses.
And the problem is we have become a loot bag, disposable housing, and it's all driven by the consumer. When I hear people say, some builders are building these big, large but cheaply built homes, so that's exactly what the consumer's demanding. And so we have to change those minds about how we build and where we spend the money and what's really important. I use an interesting metaphor, when I talk about the housing crisis and the rental crisis and everything, is that we're a society that lives in a boat with a hole in it, and our mentality is to go down and buy a pump. That's how we look at housing. Oh, it's inefficient. I'll throw a panel on the roof. Oh, it's inefficient. I'll buy high performance appliances. Oh, it's inefficient. Instead of just build it so you don't need a furnace or your furnace rarely has to work. And it's a very different value proposition, long term.
Well, people don't build for longevity. And one of the talks that I was listening to when I was researching for this is you said you can always take out the cosmetic stuff and replace that because it's easier.
Yeah.
But the longevity stuff like the roof, you want it to last a lot longer.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it the same way, you have to look at a house, choosing a house or making decisions about a house the same way you look at a spouse. The makeup is great, but every morning it's on the pillow, or on the rag, and you can reapply it. But if you have a stage 4 illness or a broken bone or something like that, what becomes more important? The makeup is not the important part. It's the built-in value, the longevity, the health, the performance of that home or of that person that are important.
And Graeme, when you're working with people, how do you set your homeowners' expectations when it comes to this showcasing the longevity of the house opposed to all the sexy features that everybody wants? No one thinks about the foundation. Everyone's like, I just want to get to the part where I get to pick out my marble, I get to pick out my lighting, fixtures.
Well, we do a lot of renovations in addition to new projects, new custom homes and so forth. So renovations, people obviously start with things like, I want a new kitchen, or I want to open up the family room. I want to create better use of space. Maybe they're adding a basement suite. They always talk about those functionality things. They're surprised that in our first meeting, I'm talking about doing inspections on the house. And I do drainage inspections with camera. I do a roof inspection with a certified roofing inspector. We do mechanical inspections. We do a complete report on, well, what do you have to work with here? And what are the things that you need to do to have longevity in your home that you put the kitchen into, that you put your basement suite into? So we offer that up front. We encourage people to do that up front. We do an energy audit on 99% of all of our renovations. And again, it's not mandatory, except in Vancouver, the city does make it mandatory for an energy audit for a renovation over $20,000, which is, I think, is really great. That should be adopted. And it just helps people have a baseline at the very least. They have a baseline to know, what do I have and what should I be looking to improve on long term. And we always talk about developing maybe a 5-year plan, and you don't have to get it all done at once and breaking it down into sections. But we always start with the envelope of the house. We talk about energy efficiency. We talk about comfort and building a home so you don't need a heavy heat source or a cooling source, that the house is self-sufficient.
It's that idea of getting going to the doctor and getting a physical before you get a nose job. Because what does it matter?
You're not setting the foundation
No,
well.
at the end of the day, and in the last number of years, I think as I get older and I have more and more kids, and they start to look at me thinking, well, I'm going to have to buy a house one day, Dad, wink. And I'm like, well, don't look at me. But you start thinking about it, and what are we going to leave in our wake as builders as far as the quality? And Graeme hit the nail on the head. We're now in the mindset where, you want to do renovations. Well, first, let's do an energy audit, and let's do an inspection. Let's see what needs to be fixed before we pull out the paint and the countertops.
But people don't want to start with the steps. They want to get to the fun part.
Unless you explain the math to them.
Well, let's talk about how we can fix this then. And I gave you a little bit of insight first. I've only been in this industry for about 6 years. One of the most shocking things, the most startling things, is that a lot of the homes that we see around us were only built for about 30 years. So first of all, we're living in a disposable society.
Yep.
And second of all, as you mentioned both, we weren't building them correctly in the first place. So let's talk about how to change the process around to create longer term homes, because there's a saying, a smart building is the one that lasts. It's not based on technology. It's not based on how pretty the wallpaper in the bathroom is. It's how long it lasts. And if we contrast this to like in Europe, where 500 years, they're okay, about it's time for a refresh. Whereas here, like they're just going to bulldoze it. How do we fix this problem and fix our affordability crisis in the process?
I think it's a big, it starts with education, and I think we've started that ball rolling, and I think builders like Graeme and my house have, started that as well, and more people are starting to understand it. But I think it really boils down to math. A lot of people don't understand maybe the technical aspects if you throw everything on a page, but if you break it down into understandable, sound bites that they can, and it's doing the math again. If you can. I use an example where if I gave someone $100,000 to renovate their home in order to sell it, for more, what would they spend the money on? And still, the vast majority of people, their answer is kitchen, bathroom, basement, because those are very visual, visual, tangible things in the market. But when you start to explain, well, a $50,000 shingle roof today instead of a $100,000 on a standing seam metal roof that will outlast all of us, when that comes time to replace that, it's not going to be $50,000. It's going to be $80,000 or $100,000. And when you have to replace it again, it's going to be $150,000 or $200,000 versus, upgrading insulation in your walls and saving maybe $200 or $300 a month. Well, in 10 to 15 years, when energy costs double or triple, you're now saving 3 times that amount. So that the savings are exponential as we go forward and costs increase. The costs of long-term maintenance and operating the home are exponential. So if you show that delta in costs, it's either you're paying your bills and you can look at those savings as passive income from your home, invest them properly with compound interest. And for most people, the math works out that by the time you pay your mortgage off, you're a multimillionaire. So if you start selling that idea to people, or there are some clients as well that just dismiss all of that and say, well, I want, here's my budget and here's what I want. And we're seeing a lot of builders now that mandate, this is the way we build. If you still want the granite and the marble and the high-tech stuff, let's build your house a little bit smaller. And you can still have those things, design it open concept, design it that you can live in it with kids, you can live in it as empty nesters, you can live in it as you get older, and it's accessible, and start showing the math to people. I think that makes the most sense. And these kind of things, unfortunately, have to be mandated because the masses don't always make the best choices.
And I think shifting that mindset, showing them the numbers, because that's the thing is everybody wants a bigger house because they look at what their friends have and they want to keep on be like, oh, I haven't made it till I have a 5-bedroom house. It's like, well, you might not need a 5-bedroom house, but it's trying to like change that mindset.
Yeah. And it's great to have a Lamborghini unless you can't afford to insure it and put gas in it. I find now as we're educating our kids more and more on finances, I said to my son Quentin, he wanted to get into the boat rental business in the Bahamas. I said, I'll support you. And he starts sending me, photos and listings of $1 million boats. And I said, Q, here's a $10,000 Boston Whaler. Let's do proof of concept and let's make this work and we'll add on the next thing. And I think it's really, it really comes down to education. There's no such thing as predatory lending. There's no such thing as, all of this stuff. It's irresponsible borrowing. It's living beyond our means. And we have to change that because what it's created is a society that is heading back into the feudal system where those 80% of young Canadians have given up on home ownership. But not only that, in the near future, they won't be allowed to buy a home. No investment corporation or international fund or multifamily homeowner is going to sell a cash flowing asset to anyone. It doesn't make sense. So we're putting ourselves into a position where homeowners and the average Canadian at some point in the very near future will not have the luxury to decide how they want to renovate, how they want to build, what color it is, because you won't own the property. So unless we change this now and put real assets and build real assets as homes, long-term, multi-generational, and people understand that value and can see it on paper, we're just headed in the wrong direction.
Okay, so let's dig on how we can enhance the value of those homes so we can turn the tide back and solve some of these problems. Because what you've just spoken about is on the minds of a lot of people. I'm worried about whether my kids will even be able to afford to buy in this time zone. So let's talk about how to fix it.
Well, you're just going to give them your house, aren't you? That's what my kids think's going to happen.
They'd stop growing, maybe. But
Mike, didn't you want to make a multiplex and have different units for them?
well, that's the plan. Yeah.
Well, apparently you're having more.
Apparently you're more.
Better not be.
How many kids?
I have 3.
You have 3.
Yeah, but they're teenagers now, so it feels like 8.
Yeah.
He's got more than
Well, I've
you.
got 4, but we figured out the problem. So
Yeah, the problem is I didn't stop at 2. But,
yeah.
I love my kids. They're just at that loud stage. So as we're talking about our own home, we're looking at a lot of this stuff anyway. So let's talk about it. And there's 3 things I think that I'd like to have you guys talk about. The first is ICF for basement concrete area. So my home was built in 1981. They dug a hole, they put mold, they poured the concrete, you touch it, it's cold. That shouldn't be the case anymore, right?
No, it shouldn't. So we just finished a laneway for a family. It's net zero, it's platinum built green, and we started with a crawl space because they are only limited to a certain amount of square footage for this laneway. In the crawl space, we did ICF, and we did everything is set up so that all their mechanical system is in the crawl space. It's easy access through a hatch. They can do proper storage, and it starts there. So even in a laneway, that's not the norm. That's not what's taught. And so that had to come from an education of that particular client of what they wanted long-term, and happens to be for one of their family members. So they wanted long-term, and they barely have any energy costs for that unit completely.
And that's a great sales feature. There is an increased capital cost to do ICF or to form and pour conventionally and use a 2-pound poly spray foam. there's an increased capital cost up front for that. But if you then, as part of the sales package, can put down, however, $250 a month is not going out the window to operate this, and you can show that over long-term, whether investment or savings or whatever it is, and the increase over the years with the capital cost, these things start to make sense day one.
Well,
And
the
that-
one thing
that
you
was
can't
a-
do with a business case, the one thing you can't articulate is how comfortable that house is going to be for the
Right.
duration of ownership too.
Yeah.
Math doesn't matter. If your house is too hot or too cold, it's too hot or too cold.
And I gave the example of a new build. So we just finished a 1908 heritage renovation that had a 5-foot basement. We lifted the house, put a brand new 2-bedroom suite in, all done with ICF, and then lowered the house back down onto those walls. So whether we're adding onto a house, whether we're renovating a home in the case of where you need a new foundation, new crawl, or whatever it might be, or you're building a new home, you can incorporate ICF technology.
And the building envelope needs to be sound as well, just like the windows and everything a part of it. I live in a 1940s building. Windows are terrible. They're kind of like the windows here. It feels like a windstorm is coming through. So I don't think people realize that outsolation is like very important. There's word on the street is outsolation the new insulation. Can you explain a
like
little bit?
an EFIS system, like an exterior insulated
Yeah.
finishing system. So that it's interesting you mentioned the windows. I use an example occasionally where if you're in the prairies in the middle of winter and it's minus 50 or whatever it is, would you choose a bag of pink insulation or a roll of vapor barrier? If you could have one of those things. Windows, the glass doesn't leak. The finish around the glass, the way it's insulated, the way it's sealed, even older windows can be relatively efficient if the opening itself isn't leaking. That's a huge area of heat loss. Rim joist is another big one, in those areas. So looking at that, and having that option, if you don't want to rip everything down inside the building and you do have the option of doing the EFIS system outside by insulating the exterior of the building and air sealing that properly and increasing the efficiency of the building in itself without disturbing everything inside. It's not maybe necessarily always the best option, but it's more affordable than completely emptying your property.
It's like basically putting a nice big blanket around your home.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of systems out there. Rockwool's a great system. There's polystyrene exteriors. There's lots of different systems for them on the outside. And you're seeing it not just in renovations where you don't want to disturb, but you're also seeing it in new construction and even multi-use and the 6-story wood frame buildings that are going up for condos and so forth. They're doing outsolation as well, because with the new step code here in BC, it's hard in a 2x6 configuration to use standard insulation. So by adding the outside insulation, you're able to still do your plumbing on the exterior wall, for example, but still have that house wrap and so forth. So there's lots of examples.
They need to put a big blanket around my apartment building because it is freezing all the time.
Yeah.
But you can't
Or
change
buy
the
you a
apartment.
sweater.
Oh, thank you. I need a better heater.
Actually, what we need to do right now is, what we should do, actually? We should take a couple minutes to thank our amazing sponsors, and we'll come back and continue this conversation. So if you guys can hold off for just a couple minutes, we'll be right back.
Measure Twice, Cut Once is grateful to our podcast partners, Fortis BC, BC Housing, and Trail Appliances. Support from our partners helps us share expert knowledge and resources with families looking to build, design, and renovate the home right for you. For BC Housing, creating access to housing solutions that meets everyone's needs is a guiding principle. BC Housing is working with governments, nonprofits, and residential construction industry members to create practical solutions to BC's housing challenges. To learn more about BC Housing initiatives, programs, and services, go to bchousing.org. And we all need reliable and efficient equipment for better comfort, health, and safety of our homes. Whether you want to adopt some energy-saving habits or take on a major energy efficiency upgrade, Fortis BC can help you save energy. Be sure to visit fortisbc.com, where you can also find amazing tips on low and no-cost ways to save energy, plus great information on what Fortis BC is doing on low-carbon energy with solutions such as renewable natural gas. Trail Appliances makes everyday life better with the best selection in Western Canada, hassle-free delivery, and a price match guarantee. You'll always get the best deal at Trail Appliances. You'll love buying an appliance as much as you'll love using it. Affordable, accessible, quality housing is a top-of-mind issue for many British Columbians.
All right, welcome back. We were having a really good conversation before we took a break about some of the elements in a home to help stop this trend of homes that aren't valuable, that homes that people won't be able to buy, and that homes that are essentially disposable. So talking a little about some of the things like ICF and envelope construction and windows, let's turn our attention to some of the things inside of the home. Of course, we're talking about mechanical systems and HVAC, renewable energy, solar, photovoltaic. Can you guys give us your perspective on that? Because we're going from a time when we maybe had one source of energy for the home to so many different options. And how do we balance all of that and make the right decision for whatever projects we're working on?
Well, if I could start by saying the house is a system. So all those things do function together. When you're talking about adding insulation or making the house more airtight, you also have to talk about what's going on inside as far as ventilation. And mechanical is a system. So it's, people replace their furnace or they add a heat pump, but they aren't necessarily addressing the rest of the system. So once you understand that you need to think through all those components and how they interact together, and like Bryan said, you can put in a new furnace and and have a more energy efficient heat source. But if the house is a sieve of energy, then you're just throwing money out the walls in anyways.
Yeah, you're just pouring more water into the strainer. Right. So I think you have to look at the envelope first, and again, a great example, and I love to teach by metaphor to the average homeowner that doesn't get the technical part. I say, build it like a Yeti cooler. Mm-hmm. You can put your beer and your ice in there, and 2 weeks later you have a cold beer and you still have some ice. Or you can build it like one of the Canadian Tire foam coolers and leave the lid off, and by lunch you've got warm beer. So if you build that envelope correctly, the amount of energy you need to heat and cool that home is almost nil. We built a 6,000 square foot custom in place of a 900 square foot bungalow that was single pane windows and mold in the basement, asbestos in the attic, and a 1960s furnace. Then it cost us $500 a month on average to heat and cool that home. The new 6,000 square foot bungalow was less than $50 a month.
Wow.
And again, it was, we spray foamed under the slab. 2x6 wall construction, all spray foam in the attic, spray foam outside the foundation. Of course, had the HRV and air exchange in there. But our furnace never turned on. It was harder to cool the home in the summer than it was to heat it in the winter, because a lot of those appliances as well are releasing heat constantly, cooking in the back of your fridge. That would keep the home warm and comfortable. So, there were often times in the winter where we'd crack a window to get some fresh air in. But so that's the idea. You have to build, all of the other things. And people talk about putting solar on the roof. And again, it's that pump and the boat with a hole in it idea. If you build your boat without a hole in it, that solar becomes a revenue generator for you. Yeah. If you put the solar all over the roof and you put the pump in, you still got the hole. It's just offsetting the loss, which farther in the future will become more and more and more expensive to operate. So the idea, anytime you look at the building envelope or the mechanicals inside, it's about reducing the amount of energy you need to use, which, by the way, for the past 10, 15 years, we get so much green marketing. Mm-hmm. Green, 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 green. I look at green as green, $20 bills. The more money you can save operating and replacing things on your home and, maintaining things long-term on your home, the less impact you have on the environment, the less energy you're using, the less materials you're replacing, the more money in your pocket. So it's green. Everybody gets green. It's great.
Well, and you just hit it a little bit earlier, the fact that people will get solar panels or do other type of things that are supposed to be eco-friendly, but if their home isn't built properly, they're just kind of adding to the problem.
Just another pump.
But everyone's like, oh, well, I got to get a heat pump because everyone's getting it. But it's like, yeah. Do I have other problems in my house? Like what time, my year, or how old is it?
That's where, like Graeme said, the energy audit on your home, before you do anything, will identify very clearly, where am I throwing money out the window? Nobody will drive down the highway throwing money out the window. No. But we do it sitting at home. So it's really important to look at that.
We see heat pumps in other areas too. There's a house we worked on a large mechanical room, and we expected a heat pump in there to recirculate that air to mitigate the heating and cooling cost. because it wasn't a net zero home.
Right.
So there's things we can do. Now, for our viewers and listeners, quick shout out. There's a great HAVAN Master Sessions episode on our YouTube channel with Mark Rosen of Building Knowledge, walking through all of our systems and all of these systems in depth. So as great as it is to talk to folks like yourselves, they're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive with you. So if you want to learn more about this area outside of what Bryan and Graeme are talking about, check out Mark's episode for sure.
Okay,
It does sound great because there's so many different systems and you need to understand them and make them work together.
it's hard. Like, I come from a building family, but this is not what I do daily. And I even find that, like, oh, there's so many things that I need to understand, especially doing this podcast. So I love that there's so many great resources that you can learn from, and YouTube as well.
Yeah. On the green note, it's interesting. We have this mentality in North America that, you order some solar panels and a truck shows up and you open the box and you pull them out and you think somewhere someone is planting a tree and cleaning up a river, and saving a dolphin. But the reality is those products have, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So somewhere there is a city, with the river on fire from the heavy metal production, the production of those implements, those materials, that we don't consider that cost, in general, in the bigger picture. We just pulled them out. We think this is great. It's free energy. Well, no, we do have a cost to pay. It just may not be in our backyard or next door, but it's somewhere. And, unless your home is efficient already, there's really no net benefit when you do the math on those.
But that's like a whole other topic. Like, I was just discussing with someone that was an impact company, and they say, like, greenwashing is such a big thing, especially in the home industry. As you know, it's like, yes, we want to do better. We have things in place here in Vancouver, like the step code, to get us up to more energy efficient homes and more, homes that are going to be better for the planet and longer lasting. But the problem is there's so many things out there in the home building industry that's like, buy this and you'll be green. And everyone's like, I'm greener, I'm saving the planet. It's like,
I think a lot of people glaze over when you start to heavily sell them on green. Green, eco, all these taglines that have come up, people just kind of glaze over and they're like, oh, I've heard enough of this. But if you say, well, green is a $20 bill, that they perk up all of a sudden. What? If you spend this so that you can spend less and consume less and replace less, all of a sudden you've got money in your pocket. There's your green. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it means you're using less fossil fuel, you're using less energy, you're replacing materials less often. So you're having a benefit to the environment, but you're also receiving that benefit of cash.
Let's stay on that topic. That's a very important topic, right? Because you know what BC stands for, right?
What's that?
Bring cash.
Bring cash.
Yeah.
I knew where you were going, and I was
absolutely. Graeme, I want to defer to you. And this is partly because I want to build a place, but partly because we want to make it easier for everybody to build a place. We know there are grants. We know there are loan programs. We know there are rebates. Can you talk to a little about them as far as why we want to take advantage of them and what rationale there is for doing one methodology over another in that process that you're working through?
Well, first of all, recognize that programs do come and go and they change. And so for 25 years, I've been doing programs or being part of whatever the rebate programs, utility programs, government incentive programs have been available over the years. And it starts by doing an energy audit, and with a qualified energy advisor can guide you through those programs. So we guide people what's available based on the choices you're going to make for your home. But right now, there are a lot of things available. We have a $40,000 interest-free loan when you're doing many energy upgrades to your home. Most of the grant, rebate, and loan programs are directed to people renovating their homes, not for new builds. So with the exception of solar power, everything is directed towards increasing the energy efficiency of your existing house, which is great. But there's also programs for special needs. For example, there's programs if you're putting a basement suite in, a legal basement suite. There's programs also for if you have a family member over the age of 65 and you're building a suite for them, or you're doing any medical upgrades in the house, including better air quality for someone who has respiratory issues. So there's not just about energy efficiency, there's those types of programs available as well.
and you have to be careful, like you alluded a little bit to it as well, because I know sometimes recently as well, they'll have the rebate programs out there, but you might not qualify it, or they'll get somebody to do the work and then all of a sudden they won't get the rebate. So it's very important to have a builder that knows what they're doing to guide you in the rebate process.
Yeah, there are lots of little caveats, like the product has to be very specific to what's been approved for the rebates, and also who's doing the work. They need to be on the approval list. So working with a certified builder, renovator, who actually is on the list and has that availability to them, as we do with our team, that's the first step.
Hey, Bryan, I got a question for you. Of all these things we talked about, and there's so many different areas, if someone is thinking about doing a renovation for their house, we're always deal with constrained budgets here. All the things we talked about, what would you, in your opinion, be the most important one for a homeowner to consider?
Well, it's interesting. There is a way to stick to your budget 100% of the time, and it's very simple. It is do the important work and be willing to compromise on the finishes, so that, do the important work to save money on your home and make it more efficient. I always say do the more permanent things first. They are the priorities. When it comes to going over budget or what we should, I say to people, let's do the important work here on the insulation or what have you. Nobody rips their kitchen out, the cabinets, to upgrade insulation in 5 years, but you can do that first and upgrade your cabinets later. They're easy to pull out and change. Leaving your existing appliances, your fridge, freezer, all that kind of stuff for later. That's something you can pull right off the budget. The countertop, I've rarely seen a marble countertop come out in one piece, but you can save the money there and do laminate and not worry about it when you're ready to replace it. So the focus for me, always first, and interestingly enough, over 8 or 9 seasons of Leave It to Bryan, which was we kind of made a joke to create that show. During disaster DIY, I walked into a house with, single pane windows and leaking roof and the whole thing. Guy said, I want a man cave in the basement. And I said, you need a roof and windows and insulation. And I kind of made a joke and said, I would love to walk into these houses, just take their money, take their keys, and throw them out in the backyard. We created a series around that. And people ask, how do you decide what to do? And for me, right off the bat, it's health and safety is number one. After that, it comes down to efficiency, longevity, and affordability. And the very last thing is, what color are we going to paint it and what kind of backsplash are we going to put in? So do the things now, spend the money now to reduce the operating costs and the long-term maintenance costs of your home. Look at that savings as passive income, invest that, and use those to upgrade the cosmetics going forward.
Well said. And another thing that we want to ask you, we already kind of discussed this back in episode 42 when we had you on, but always love to get everybody's opinion.
What episode are we on now?
I don't know. I think like we're in the 60s or something. I don't know. We've been doing this for
Been
a
a
while. But what should you look for when hiring a builder from your advice?
I mean, there's a lot. It boils down to, one very simple thing. Once the homework has been done. And, Graeme has been part of our Baeumler Proof Contractor program for a long time that ensures, everybody is licensed, insured, is covered by comp, has great trade references and a history of good work. And all of those things have to be there. That file has to be full with all the paperwork in the background to make sure you protect yourself from liability, make sure you protect yourself from, hiring someone that just decided yesterday to become a home builder. But at the end of the day, what's really important is that you sit down with someone and you connect with them and talk to them and trust them. I'm often asked, after I walk through my home with a builder or a contractor, what questions should I ask them? And my honest answer is, and if you've ever walked through a property with Graeme, you shouldn't have any questions. Mm-hmm. This should be somebody that walks through and explains everything to you and says, here's what we're going to do. Here are the options. We have an issue over here that's going to cost an extra $30. Here's where we can save that money. You want someone that's going to provide you with all the information that has, as Graeme and my house do, have the understanding of the grants and the current codes and the step code and the process and the great suppliers and subcontractors. You want that person that, is not in it for the money right up front. Yeah. They're in it to be in it. This is their livelihood and they want to continue it. But the most important part of it is that connection between the people. It's the same as choosing a partner or a spouse. You have to have that open line of communication, that trust. And just like when you go to the doctor, you have to at some point sit back and say, you're the doctor.
You're like, sorry, I want to do any doctor stuff on my own. So, WebMD does not help you guys.
That's the worst. That is, I mean, that's like watching those Reno shows on TV. It's the worst.
Those shows.
There are commercials where a lot of things happen that you don't get to see.
We'd like to hear more about those when you come back. So, one of our favorite parts of hosting this podcast is getting to talk to great people like yourself and Graeme. One of our least favorite parts of holding this podcast is when the conversation ends. And we're almost at that point, but we'd be remiss if we didn't summarize some of the great information. This could have gone on for 3 hours and we still wouldn't have talked about all of it, but you guys did a really great job of encapsulating, some really important considerations for homeowners. We talked about good bones and that correlation between affordability and sustainability when it comes to upgrading your home. I love the idea of talking about the house as a system, a complete system, as opposed to a sum of components. Programs come and go. So work with someone who can help you get and take access and use those programs. And finally, and I love this, pick the important stuff and focus on the finishes later.
Yeah.
Because that'll make sure you've got the bones like we talked about and the foundation, for lack of a better term, to do pretty much anything else you want in that house for the duration of the home. So really appreciate the insight from both of you as always.
You got to write the book before you choose the cover art.
I guess I'm going to go delete all my pins on Pinterest now.
That's not how I wrote my book.
It's not, and it's interesting. That is what a lot of people think. They the more I talk across Canada, the more people they kind of go, oh, well, there go all my dreams. And it's actually the exact opposite if you sell it properly. If you build and renovate that home properly, it will pay for you to upgrade your kitchen every 10 to 15 years and put exactly what you want into it. And it won't cost you any more than that old, inefficient home that you can't afford.
Very good advice. And which leads to my next thing, but you kind of already gave a great tip, but I might let you give one more. But I'll pass it to Graeme first. Is one more tip for the homeowner right before we go. One more tip.
Well, Bryan talked about find people you can trust, and that's what I tell people you're really looking to do is who can I trust to start the process and start the conversation with. So find a person or people that you can sit down and have a conversation at your kitchen table for a cup of coffee and talk about what you're planning to do, what you'd like to do, what your have-tos are, what your wishes and your Pinterest is, and then have that same person be able to walk you through what you should do and what the priorities could be, and then pull all that information properly together and then make good decisions.
Great. I won't be deleting my Pinterest account then. So we're good to go. One more tip from you. I don't know. It doesn't even need to be a building tip. Do you have any lotto numbers to pick? I don't know.
Lotto numbers? No, I have a great one. Actually, our living in the Bahamas, between Bahamas and Florida and traveling and, after 20 years of shows and meeting people and building different businesses, I've realized one thing. The net result for every single person on this planet is the same. So if there's something you want to do, a risk you want to take, a place you want to go, a business you want to build, do it today. Start today. The Bahamians have a really interesting mindset. And, you walk down the island and you would see someone that, may not own shoes and doesn't have all the windows in their home and doesn't have a floor in their home. And you say, good morning, how are you? And you immediately think, oh, what a stupid question. I mean, look, and their response is, I'm amazing because I woke up today. And it's a great opportunity to have another good day. I think a lot of people get stuck in this, woe is me, everything is terrible. If you wake up in the morning, you are luckier than about 50,000 people that day. Sorry, 50 million people so far this year. So, take advantage of that and go for it.
That's some great perspective.
That's life advice.
Everybody's going to die, so do what you want.
I've been living under a palm tree too long.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, on that positive note, it has been a great conversation. What we really love about both of you is that you're both incredibly candid and you tell it like it is, but you also break it down in a way that people like me can understand. Before we go, I have a little bit of housekeeping. Once you've done those renovations or you've built that new house and you've put the ICF downstairs and done everything the way you're going to do, eventually you're going to need to wander out to your backyard to cook something for your family. One of the easiest ways to do it is by winning the barbecue we're going to give away. So if you've just finished watching or listening to this episode, grateful. Thank you for your support. Tell your family, tell your friends, and of course, like and share this episode, and you will be entered in a chance to win a Napoleon Prestige P500 stainless steel natural gas barbecue valued at $1,600. Compliments of our fantastic podcast partners at Fortis BC. All you have to do is go to havan.ca/measure twice, cut once.
And for notes and links and everything mentioned on today's episode, including resources shared by Bryan and Graeme, go to havan.ca/measure twice, cut once. Thank you to Trail Appliances, Fortis BC, BC Housing, Raimi Films, JPod Creations, and AI Technology and Design. It takes a team to build a home, and it takes a team to build a podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.